Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, What to Do When a Loved One Passes. My name is Kelly Schweppe, and I'm the Program Marketing Specialist here at General Electric Credit Union. We are so glad you've joined us as we have a lot of great content ahead. Thanks to technology, we are excited to be able to connect with you on such an important topic and wanted to thank you all for tuning in from the comfort of your home, work, or wherever you may be. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Julie, Tamara, and Tiffany and take us through today's topic.
Hi, thanks, Kelly. As Kelly said, my name is Julie, and I am the Relationship Banking Manager, which goes right along with this specialized account group. So thank you for joining us. And I'm just going to go over the agenda, which is going to start with what to expect when a loved one passes. We have a timeline we're going to go over. That's more to do with the order you would do things when a loved one passes: contact relatives, the clergyman, funeral home, etc. We're going to talk about common terminology. That's a wonderful resource. Ownership types for deposit accounts, such as joint, trust accounts, those sort of things. We're going to talk about debt resolution. When a spouse dies, your income is going to change, so we're just going to talk about some things that you can do as far as preparing for that. We're going to talk about estate accounts, safe deposit boxes, quick contacts. We have a great list of contacts that are normally used. We have trust changes. So if your spouse had a revocable or living trust, what do you do now? We're going to talk about the impact of COVID and the CDC regulations for the funerals. We're going to talk about next steps, and then at the end, we're going to take your questions. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tamara.
Hello, my name is Tamara Barnett. I'm the Vice President of Business Development here, and we do encourage questions because this is our first time putting this together. We want it to be useful to you. So we're going to start out with what to expect. So when a loved one passes away, our goal at the credit union is to provide you with a personalized experience. The branch team has been trained. We have a specialized team within the company that knows how to answer most of these questions. This is where this resource came from. So we're here for you, and we understand it's a very challenging time for you. We know that grief can be handled in a lot of different ways. There's anger, denial. Maybe it's something you just don't want to think about or take next steps on. Maybe it's something that you're dealing with sadness or depression. We understand that, and we will try and help you through these steps. Some of the things we encourage you to do, if you can, enlist a friend or a family member to go to appointments with you. You may have the role of the spouse or the executor or whatever, but having someone as a sounding board is huge, and it's such a beneficial thing for you. So if you can do that, that would be great. Also understand that each organization or bank or credit union or credit card company will have different rules. We are going to give you the basic pieces. What we're saying is not just specific to the credit union, but hopefully we'll cover the basis of what a lot of the different places do. Some will have very different policies, so it's going to be dependent on where you're at. We may say that we need something from you. In fact, we do not need an original death certificate. Some other places may require original death certificates. And you're going to say, well, General Electric Credit Union didn't need that. Again, policies will differ. It's not a blanket piece requirement across the board. It's how their company has decided to handle these situations. So they may be different. Also, ask questions. You're going to be thrown a whole lot of information. You're not a lawyer, most of you. You're not a tax accountant. You're not doing this for a living. This is not something you're trained in. So you're going to have questions. ask them. It's your right to understand what they're telling you. If you still don't understand, ask again. Don't hesitate to get those questions resolved. Okay? The next step is going to be just a timeline of what needs to be done first, second, and third. There are some things that you're at that point, you're like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? So hopefully this will give you a resource of the things that should be done immediately and things that don't have to happen right away, that you can take your time on. As far as the immediate needs, some of the things to think about, caring for the dependents or the pets. You know, your loved one may have lived alone and had a cat. You need to make sure that there's someone who can take in that pet, even if it's a temporary situation, to make sure that they're cared for. It may be getting the groceries out of the refrigerator. It may be making sure the plants are watered, those kind of things. Also, there may be some expenses that need to be paid for the pets. Keep record of that. If you end up to board an animal and you end up becoming the executor of the estate, those costs can be paid for out of the estate expenses if you choose. So if there are those expenses, document them. Monitor the home. Unfortunately, there are people out there who will look at death certificates or death notifications in the paper and look at the homes. Make sure it is secure. Keep an eye on the home. Answer the phone messages. Again, discard food or water plants. Just make sure the house is secure. The people that you'll need to notify as soon as possible, obviously close family and friends. The deceased employer, if they're still working. The clergy and funeral director, those are a huge resource for you, so you'll want to have them enlisted as soon as possible. The physician, if they weren't in their care at the time of passing, you'll want to let the physician know that your loved one has passed away. The attorney, and again, health insurance companies. So these are the ones we recommend be done right away. Then we go to things within the first week. Oftentimes, they may have already planned their funeral arrangements, so check through the loved one's safe box, wherever they may keep those pieces. See if it's already been prepared for you. If not, arranging the burial or funeral or cremation should be some of the first things you do. Again, ask a friend to go with you to the mortuary. If they did not pre-plan their funeral arrangements and access is not available to their accounts to pay for those expenses, you or a family member may need to go ahead and pay those expenses, but keep track of them to get them reimbursed. Depending on how accounts are set up, and we'll talk about that later, you may not have access to the funds you need to take care of these immediate pieces. Prepare for the funeral service and obituary. You obviously want to put an obituary in if at all possible. You'll want to see if there's any particular things that they want to do for the funeral service, any passages, songs, photos of the loved one, those kind of things. So that can be done within that first week to enlist aid on those pieces. Ordering the death certificate, and this is usually done through the funeral home. Again, for the credit union, we do not need an original. We would like to see an original, make a copy of it, or a very good copy will suffice for us. But again, if it's something that's being done for investment pieces, they will most likely want an original. So you want to order, I would suggest, between 5 and 10 original copies, depending on the investment depth of your family member. And again, funeral home can advise you on this. Realize that copies or the original death certificates, I think we said the average cost is about $25 per copy. So realize that when you're deciding how many that you'll need, okay? People to also notify at this point: government agencies, Social Security, Department of Veterans Affairs, any of the financial institutions. We want to make sure that any accounts they had are secured and that no one's coming in claiming to be your loved one who's passed away. We want to make sure that those are secured for you. And then it's a time for the extended family and friends to be notified. Sounds like you've got a huge to-do list at this point. But now we're going on to the first month. Pay the bills. I know this sounds silly, but keeping those accounts current is very helpful. So you may want to look at their transaction register or their record of their bills to see what has and has not been paid. Continue to keep up with those. Don't ignore letters that they might get from creditors. Let them know what's happened. They will work with you for arrangements or to put notifications on the accounts that they're in process of being transitioned or resolved or whatever. So make sure you do that. Things to look for as far as documents that will help you along the process. And this doesn't mean go in and ransack somebody's house. That sounds horrible. But these are things you may need through the next couple of months. Obviously, a copy of the will, any deeds on property, insurance policies, trust documents, bank account investment statements, birth certificates, marriage licenses, divorce papers, certificates of title for vehicles, Social Security information, death certificate for the family or friends who may be listed as payable on death. So if you have a grandfather who passed away who named their grandchildren as beneficiary on specific accounts, in order for the children to receive those funds, they will need to bring the financial institution a copy of the death certificate. So making extra copies and having those as a resource is a great idea. Also, the most recent tax return. There will be a final tax return that will be required to be done on the deceased family member. So maybe deciding if this is the executor who's going to do that or the closest family member, but that does need to be processed. So getting that last tax return is very helpful in that process. And also looking for safe deposit box keys. If your loved one had a safe deposit box, they would have received 2 keys from the institution that are identical. Most often they will have one in a separate place or have given it to another family member. Making sure that you have both of those at the time you resolve the safe deposit box is less costly, and makes the whole process more expedient. So if you can find those keys, that's a great idea. Other thing to remind you of, you're saying, well, I've got power of attorney so I can go in and resolve everything. At time of death, a power of attorney is no longer valid. That's only a power that's given to you while your family member is alive. So it will not be a great help to you as you move through the final wishes. Some more things within the next month. People to notify: financial planner, accountant, investment broker, social and professional organizations. I should have put in here social media as well. I don't know if anyone's on the Facebook, things like that, but the access codes or things, it's a good idea to have those available for the loved ones to know how to get on those and maybe write a notification so that anything could be followed up there, or to remove them from that social media should you choose. Creditors, the utility company, Department of Motor Vehicles, all of those pieces. Couple tips as you're going through this. When you notify an individual or organization about a death, make sure you understand what to do next. So if you're letting Social Security know that your spouse has died, they'll notify that. But it's not the same thing as registering for survivors or survivors benefits. That's the next step. And oftentimes they may not ask you to take that step at that time. And you're saying, well, I already told them about this. It's all taken care of. It's not necessarily true. So check and see what next steps are besides just the notification to do what you need to. Tip number 2, Social Security does suggest that you file for the survivor's benefits within the month of your spouse's death. You don't have to do it that month. However, you only have 6 months of retroactive benefits that can be paid. So you really do have to file for this within a 6-month time period. But again, they're going to suggest doing it right away. That's a great practice, but if you're not ready, you don't have to immediately. Just don't wait until you're not able to get your full benefits. And at this time, I'm going to flip back to Miss Julie, and she's going to give you some of the terminologies.
So this is a great resource I was speaking of earlier. We've already talked about some of these. An EIN, what is that? So if you are going to open a trust or an estate, you're going to need a tax ID number. So you go through Social Security for that. Well, there's other things. What is a release from administration? What is a successor trustee? Read through these definitions. You can print it. You can go back to the recorded version of this in a week and look at it again. And if you have questions, please let us know. We will be more than happy to help you with that. And I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. So as you know, there is a lot of different types of accounts and products and services that you can have at different institutions. And with those, they typically, a lot of the times, will give you a choice of how you want them to be set up. So there are different types of ownership on those. They can be a single account with just one person on there. You can have joint accounts with multiple people on there. You can have beneficiaries on there on top of either being single account owned or joint account owners. And those beneficiaries would only get the funds if both of those people passed away, depending on how each institution set their accounts up. If there is a trust, then, in that case, a lot of the times, if the accounts are in the trust, then we would make the funds payable to the trust. The trustees could then access that money at that time through that trust. Probate is, court documentation where the court has elected one person to go ahead and represent the person who's passed away to take care of all of their financials and all of their assets, all of their debts, their entire estate. So they're going to, if you have probate, that only applies if none of the other situations apply. So if there isn't a joint owner, if there aren't beneficiaries, if there isn't a trust, that's when probate comes into play. And a lot of the times you'll need some sort of court documentation for titled assets like vehicles and things like that. Some institutions may have something called cross-collateralization, and that's basically where if you have a deposit account with balances in them, but a debt is owed, some institutions can take the money from those accounts to pay the debts first, and then if there's anything left, pay it to the joint owners or the beneficiaries or the trust or the executor, or the estate, I mean. So, be sure to understand what the policies are at each institution when you open an account, just so that you know how it would be handled. And if there is debt, a lot of the times what you'll need to do is, if there's a joint owner, then you can talk about it freely with the institution. If you aren't on the debt, there's limited information that you can usually get about the debt, and that's usually where probate or court documentation would come into play. So you could get more information. You could get transaction history and things like that, more of the details. Anybody can pay any debt, but as far as information goes, that's where we would need the court documentation. So if there's a joint owner, the joint owner automatically becomes responsible for that debt. They would need to reapply for the loan, if it's a loan, or for a vehicle or something like that, refinance it, just with us. Other institutions may be different. They may have different policies or procedures. But we do want to make sure that we can get everything put into your name and that we can extend the term if you need a lower payment, things like that. So we want to take into account what your new finances will be so that you can afford to keep your vehicle, so that you can afford to, pay this on your own terms. And, when we do a loan application, there's a lot more leniency in these type of situations due to someone passing away with our underwriting and things. So, just ask questions when it comes to that. sometimes if you might not typically qualify for a loan in these situations, sometimes exceptions can be made in that case. So don't be afraid to just apply at least. With titles and deeds, it's better to go ahead and address those now. And the reason is because when you go a year from now and you go to get tags on a vehicle, or if you need to sell something or sell the house or something like that, it's easier to go ahead and do it beforehand and get the title transferred into your name or the executor's name or the successor trustee's name, just so that when you go to sell it, it's a seamless process. It's very quick. So the person buying it can pay you or the institution if there's a loan, and then at that time you go ahead and give the authority to get the title transferred to them. Otherwise, it would be a lot longer of a process to try and get your loved one off of there that's passed away and then go ahead and sell it. So it's good to address those, in the immediate future once you find out someone's passed away, within that timeline that we introduced earlier. But with mortgage loans, you're not always required to repay the loan itself if you're a successor in interest. If you're a joint owner, you're still required to pay. But if you're a successor in interest, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to repay it. But keep in mind, if you don't repay the mortgage, then that institution could go ahead and foreclose on the home. So they're not going to come after you necessarily for the debt. They're not going to come after you to say you have to repay it. It's not going to affect your credit. But if you don't make the payment, then the home could be foreclosed on. So just keep that in mind. And there's a federal regulation on that actually with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So there is an article in there about that. If you have more questions, you can read up on that. And then you don't have to refinance the mortgage if you are a successor in interest. So in that case, there are tax benefits if you do. Sometimes you can even get a lower interest rate, so it might benefit you, but you don't have to. So it's up to you on what you decide to do with that. For safe deposit boxes, there are different titles and different ways that people can set those up. So the leasee is the owner of the box. The co-leasee is the joint owner. The deputy is kind of like a power of attorney. So when you're alive, the deputy can access that box. But when someone has passed away, the deputy no longer has rights to access that box for the leasee. So at that point, if there's no co-leasee, then that's when we would need court paperwork to give access to that box to tell us. The court tells us basically who is allowed to get in that box at that point, who's in charge of the estate. It's easier if you have both keys with you, like Tamara mentioned earlier, because if you don't have both keys, if you just have one or if you don't have any at all, then we'll either have to rekey it or we'll have to drill the box, and there is a fee for that. So either the estate can be charged for that or you could pay it out of pocket. But just try to find both keys if you can and bring those with you. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Tamara now, and she'll talk about executors.
I'm sure your heads are spinning at this point, and there's a lot of things to consider. We're going to move on to one of the other fun pieces about this. If you're the executor of the estate, maybe your family member has blessed you and asked you to be the executor because you're the most financially savvy. Maybe you were the only one who didn't raise their hand at something and you got chosen for this. But this is a job, the executor of the estate. So after the death, the executor of the will has a lot of duties. The role is to close out the estate and carry out the will of the deceased. So as the executor, you're taking care of all the debts that the loved one had. You're gathering all the assets, whether it's insurance pieces or sale of property. Once all the pieces have come together, it's then up to you to distribute those based on the wishes of your family member, whether it's through a will or what they've told you orally. Hopefully there's a will so that you are better guided on this. to make sure that everything is distributed per their wishes. Okay. Your executor appointment, even though the will says you're the executor, until you actually go to the courts and are appointed as the executor, it's not going to be actionable. Oftentimes there can be one or two wills, a remake of the will later in life. Anyone can, and it may have a different executor on there. The person who goes to the courts and actually gets appointed is the one the courts recognize as the true executor. So even though an older will had someone else as the executor, if you've taken it and been appointed by the courts, it is now your role as the executor. Once you have those financial documents, you can gather additional information from all the creditors, the financial institutions, anybody that would be considering it private information that they weren't giving to you otherwise. With the executor papers, you're allowed all that information. Once you've got that appointment and you begin talking to all these people, please make sure to change the contact information that they have. We don't want any mail being mailed to your loved one's last residence if no one's there anymore. You as the executor have the right to change the contact information to you so that statements are getting mailed to you, any requests are getting mailed to you, because you're going to have to keep track of all those documents. So obviously to get this done, you'll have to go ahead and get the copy of the death certificate. Make sure you are appointed as the executor. You're going to file by filing the will and probate. Make the funeral arrangements. Again, locate all the assets, and hopefully your family member has made very good records of where things are. You may have to be a detective. You may be looking at mail that's coming in to see where it's coming from, to find out what debt obligation they might have or any insurance pieces. A good way to do that is looking at recent bank statements, and you can see what's automatically taken out each month. Maybe it's for payments on the vehicle, maybe it's for payments on insurances. Those will give you the starting point of how to gather everything together. Okay. Communicate with appropriate allies. A lot of times things have information has been given to the attorney or the accountant or the investment advisor. These guys are all there to assist you. They have a deeper knowledge of what your family members' wishes were, and they can navigate things with you. You also want to set up an estate account as the executor. As we said earlier, the estate will need an EIN. This can be gathered from the IRS website. It does not cost you anything to apply for it. You don't have to go anywhere and wait in line. So you can go there and get the EIN assigned to the estate. Make sure to keep paying bills. We don't want the mortgage on the house to not be paid as you're trying to sell the house. We would hate for anything, fees to add up or things that didn't need to happen. So continue to make those bills as the executor and then work on distributing once all those pieces are resolved. And again, as the executor, you would be the one filing that final tax return for your loved one. Another tip, please keep copies of everything. Even though you've sent the insurance form into the insurance agency 3 times now, they'll probably ask you a 4th time. Keep copies, keep records of when you sent it, who you sent it to, how you sent it. It's going to be a huge benefit to you to have these to look back on, to document so that you're not chasing your tail. Document, document, document. As far as the estate accounts, General Electric Credit Union does offer estate accounts. We'd be more than happy to assist you setting up one and help you through the process. You will need those probate documents showing you're the executor, and you will need the EIN from the IRS showing that it has been assigned a number. Another thing to be aware of, which we can't give you full information on because we're not lawyers, is relief of administration. Say your loved one lived in an apartment, had a vehicle that was a 1990 Buick, maybe had very little in the savings account. The estate isn't enough generally in that point for you to do a full-blown estate, you can request what's called a relief of administration. This is something you would go to the courts and ask for based on debts and assets that you're showing for your loved one being under a certain dollar amount. The courts can grant you this. What this means is it's not a full-blown estate. With this paper, with those items documented, you can take that to any of the creditors or financial institutions, and they can release those funds to you based on that document. Okay? The summary of release, and again, these are general numbers, but if the assets are under $50,000, you could qualify for this. In Kentucky, it's $15,000. So please research that if you find that you're in that situation. We can't give specifics on it, again, but it is an alternative to having to go the full estate plan, which can take 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 months to resolve, or even longer. The relief of administration can let you resolve those final pieces very quickly. Julie?
Well, we have a list of contacts that are most commonly used. This is another great resource. The Social Security Administration for questions is on there. Veterans Administration, if someone was in the service. OPM, Retirement Services. We have General Electric Aircraft Engineers on here because we have a lot of GE members and retirement, and so there's reason to call that number for some people. We have Todd Blessing and Eric Waldron. They are the financial service reps for General Electric Credit Union. So for the stocks and bonds or investments that you may have through them, you would need to contact. Ed Bender is a great attorney that you can use if you need advice on what to do. A lot of people use these attorneys to settle the estates, which there is a cost involved there, just an upfront warning. The next one, GEU, Specialized Account Group. That's us. Call us with any questions that you have. If we don't have the answer, we will definitely find it for you. So we welcome those phone calls. Then we go to the probate courts. Let me go back just a moment. Your funeral director is an excellent source of information. Probably knows everything there is to know since that's their job. So that is another resource. The probate court. We've listed a few in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana are the only states that we listed. And you will file with the county that your loved one lived in. And we have those numbers and addresses here. Kentucky looks a little difficult. Wills must be admitted for probate in the district court of the county, and an order issued probating the will by the district court judge. Sounds so official. Once the will is probated, it must be recorded in the county clerk's office along with the order appointing administrator or executor of the estate. So there are a few counties in Kentucky we've listed. And then Indiana is a circuit court for the Dearborn and Ohio counties, and that phone number is listed. Tamara, have you had a drink of water? You are up.
All right. Well, trusts are a wonderful thing, and a lot of times you open a trust because that means anything that your family member had was not part of things that are owned by them that would go to an estate. That's wonderful. Having this generally means that either the loved one or the loved one's spouse is the one who created the trust. When one of them passes, the trust then needs to be changed. If one of the trustees is still alive, there just needs to be an addendum to the trust removing that person as a trustee, the person who passed away. Or they may want to assign a new trustee along with themselves so that they've got someone there to guide them. or they just may rely on the successor trustees that are listed in the trust. One thing to note too on trusts, unless a power of attorney for a person clearly states that they have access to do things for the trust, they do not, because the trust is not the same thing as the person. It is an entity. It is a business. It's a separate piece. That's how it doesn't go into the estate. So just understand that it is a separate piece. We may not be able to give you trust information as the executor or as the beneficiary. The trustee would be the one who would handle how to manage those assets, okay? So a traditional living trust allows you to change the terms by creating that amendment for small changes or making a new trust agreement for larger changes. If a lot of times when trusts are originally set up, they're set up under the social security number of the person who created the trust or the guarantor. That's the titling for the person who starts the whole trust out. If it's under their social security number, it can no longer continue to be under that if the trust is being kept open and active. Because at that point, it is an entity for someone who's no longer alive. It will require its own EIN number to continue to do business as an entity. Does that make sense? So that's why you'll be asked if it's under a social security number or an EIN when you're talking about trusts. And again, if it's under someone's social security number and they're no longer alive, it will be required that you change it to an EIN as the identification number for the trust. You knew we had to talk about COVID. It's on every topic and every piece. Obviously, times are a little different now than they have been in the past. So during the pandemic, it's essential to keep in mind social distancing. Whether you choose to have a notification of someone's passing now and then have a celebration of life later on, that's obviously an option and I think is being used quite often these days. We want to make sure that we're not encouraging gathering of large groups of people that are at a higher risk. So the CDC has rules out there. Some things you can look at is virtual options for the funerals or memorial services. The CDC does have a funeral guidance for individuals and families, so I think there's a link to that on our handouts. You can check and see if there's anything specific that would pertain to what you're planning to do. Also, you may want to check that a lot of hospices are actually providing bereavement services for the whole community. So it's a celebration of life for those who've passed away during a certain time period, something like that. So it's a group gathering. You may want to check on those. If you do need help coping with things during COVID, because it's emotional time. You know, you're double impacting with the loss of a loved one on top of the COVID restrictions. This is going to hit hard. And if you do need assistance, please check the CDC's list for mental health resources. It's okay to ask for help. This is a time that definitely could need that.
All right, so after this, the next steps are going to be to start evaluating your finances. So you're going to write down everything that you can think of that would be a list of expenses, and also write down your income. Figure out how much every month that you can afford realistically and still, be comfortable with. And that way, when you go to reapply for some of these debts, or when you decide, oh, I'm going to go ahead and pay this off, I need to refinance this right now, things like that, you can make those decisions with an educated you can make an educated decision because you already have that knowledge of what your new income is supposed to be every month, what your total amount of debt is every month, and what you need it to be and what you can afford. So just kind of, write down everything you can find with all of your expenses, all of your income, whether it be pension, Social Security, things like that. And then if there's any life insurance, take that into account. Try to pay off things as much as you can so you don't have that monthly reoccurring debt. And that might help you out a little bit too. So estate planning. So we have We partner with CUSO, which is a third party that we use. That's where our investment advisors work through. They're a trusted company with us that partner with us, and they help with estate planning. They help with planning for your future, your retirement, what happens when you pass away, what happens after you pass away, how all of your accounts are set up, what happens to the funds afterwards. So that's a great resource to go ahead and use. And one thing that's not on this page is legal services. So on our contact list, we do have Ed Bender on there, and he is our attorney that we typically work with here. We do refer people to him. So if you don't have an attorney already and you would like one, Ed Bender is a great resource that the credit union uses and would highly recommend. So if you have any questions or need his phone number, he's on the contact list. All right, so lastly, we're going to go ahead and go over where you can find a resource to use all the time. So if you go into a branch, we do have a pamphlet that they are able to hand out to you that has a lot of this information in there, and you can take that home with you. We also have on our website a link to get to this virtually too. So we're going to go ahead and show you that. Bear with me just a second. I'm going to pull up our website here. All right, so when you first go to our website, we're going to go to this Information Center tab right here, and then go to the FAQs. When you click on that, it's going to bring you to this page. And right here, there's general questions. If you scroll down, it's the last one here. It says, I had a loved one pass with accounts at GECU, and how do I handle these accounts? When you click that, it's going to say that you're going to have to click on this guide to setting accounts. When you do that, a third-party disclaimer will come up. That's okay. It's just going to redirect you to another website where we've actually posted the PDF version of the pamphlet that you could get at the branch. So go ahead and click continue. And when you do, it'll bring up a virtual presentation of the pamphlet itself. So you can click through here and, you know, just read the resources. You can make it bigger by making this full screen. And then if you notice, when you hover over some of these, there's options that you can click on, and it'll bring you to more resources. So that's another thing that you can do. And then you can just click escape to get out of this full screen. And you're more than welcome to read up on this and go through the whole thing. This will help you a lot of the times, because when you're going through this and you notify an institution, you may not be in that right state of mind where you're able to remember everything that's said all at once in that conversation. So try to write notes, but also this is a resource you can look back at and say, what did they say? How did they handle this? It's in here. So you're able to know. And here's a list of those contacts back here also. So that's for your reference. It's on our website at any time along with this presentation. And that way you can pull it up when you need it, or if you have questions, then you can look at that, or you can call us, whichever is easiest. And this is our phone number right here. And you can reach out, you know, with our extension or the direct phone number, whichever is easiest for you, or you can come into a branch. So with that, I think we have pretty much everything in our presentation that we've went over discussed. So if you guys have any questions, this is when you would post it in the chat, and we'll go ahead and go over those with you guys.
Yes, so we'll go ahead and get started with the Q&A portion of the webinar. As you mentioned, if you have any questions, please use the question feature in your attendee control panel to submit the question. We do have a couple that came in and a couple that were pre-submitted, so we'll go ahead and start. The first question we received is, what gets put into the estate account?
the funds that would go into the estate account would generally be deposit accounts that don't have a joint owner or don't have a beneficiary listed on it, are not in a trust. So if it's an account that's owned solely by the person who passed away, those assets would go in there. If they sell a home that was in the name of that deceased person only, the funds from that sale would go in there. If there's life insurance policies that they get paid on, those would go in there. If they sell a vehicle or personal properties, as they're consolidating all of the assets of that person, all those funds would go into the estate account, and then all the debt would come out of that. So from gathering assets, paying debt, whatever's left is then distributed based on what the will says, and that's the executor's job, is to figure out how to get all those pieces to where they've been designated to go.
The next question we have is referring back to the contacts page. They're asking, what is OPM retirement services?
Those are, I can't speak, sorry. Those are civil servants that are not in a branch of the government, like they're not a veteran, but they still worked for the government. So they're government employees that are not technically in a veteran's role. So somebody who works at Social Security is not a veteran, but they work for the government. So that would be one of their resources to find out about their pensions and their benefits.
Thank you. The next question that just came through in the chat is, will there be a need for both your loved one's last year of life tax and estate tax returns?
Yes. Generally, you're doing, because the estate may not even be completed by the time within the 1 year of the person's passing. So the personal taxes would be incomes from that person at time where they were alive. Any interest they earned on any certificates or things like that are considered assets at the time of them being alive. Once the assets have gone into the estate, that's where the tax return for the estate would be done when it's finally dispersed. So theoretically, yes, you could have two tax requirements there.
And then I saw another question come in regarding the presentation. I'll go ahead and take that one. This presentation is being recorded and will be up on our events page in the coming week. So you do have access to continuously go back and reference the presentation, as well as there is a resource in the handouts that you're able to open and download. Another question we received is, if you are listed as a joint account owner with your loved one, do you also have the tax liability?
That would be dependent on who was listed on the account as a tax reported owner. A lot of times when you open accounts, they'll say who's going to be the primary and who's going to be the secondary owner, or the tax reported owner is that first person that's listed. And sometimes, spouses will do their taxes together, so it doesn't really matter. But if it's you and another family member or a friend, that first person, tax reported owner, is the one that would have the tax liability. When they pass away, depending on the financial institution's policies, either they will close that account and then open a new one for you, where you would now be the tax reported owner, and then the taxes are your liability at that point, or they might do what's called an assumption, where they would remove the deceased person from the account, and at that point you would be on that same account listed as a tax reported owner. So that's dependent on that piece, the tax reported owner.
The next question we have is, if loved one's only income is Social Security and pension, which would go away at time of death, what are your options for paying bills until probate is over?
Well, their pension may or may not go away depending on how they requested it. Sometimes they have it where it's with a joint survivorship, something like that. Hopefully they would have some sort of assets or savings. If we're talking about paying for a vehicle while they continue to work on the estate, modifications could be made at the financial institution to allow for smaller payments, or even to do a relief of payment for a certain time period. So it would be dependent on the institution on how they're going to handle those. And again, hopefully, the loved one has prepared some assets to be able to make those payments, or you may end up having to return the vehicle or sell the vehicle in order to make things work.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. If a loved one resides in a different state than the executor, is that where probate occurs?
Yeah, so when somebody passes away, it's always going to be in the county that the person that passed away lived in, that you'll have to file the court documentation for. So a lot of that can be found typically on the court's website for that county. You can fill out a lot of that information. You can call them over the phone. You might be able to mail some of those things. As for the court actual appointments and things like that, you'd have to see if they're going to require you to come in person or not for those. So that would be a question for the court on that behalf.
Another thing to be aware of on that is some states will not allow you to be the executor if you don't live in the same state. So that can be a state-by-state issue, where there are some states that if you're not a resident of that state, you could not be designated as the executor for someone who passed away in that state. Again, that's going to be dependent on the state that you're dealing with.
And another question that just came in, I think that applies to the original question asked, is they asked, does that apply in Ohio?
So for Ohio, you're allowed to file in the person's county with the court for the executor paperwork or the relief of administration, depending on which route you go. And in Ohio, it's not required that you have to live in Ohio to be the executor. We have worked with other, family members that have lived out of state, where they have, mailed a lot of stuff to us or emailed a lot of things to us, to where we can help them resolve the accounts.
And then we have a couple more questions. Again, if anybody on the webinar has another question that you thought of, please use your question feature in your attendee control panel, and I'll get that asked. Tamara, I think you touched on this earlier in the beginning, but can you remind us how many death certificates you suggest?
I suggest 5 to 10. And again, if they have if they're one of those people that goes to every credit union for a certificate at a different credit union, you'll need more. If they have life insurance policies, they'll usually need one for that. Again, originals are usually required for just some very specific needs. If you're doing something where it's transferring stocks, a lot of times they will want an original certificate. So that's a higher level need. I would say, again, for originals, 5 to 10. From there, you can make copies. I know for us, if you bring in an original or even a copy, we'll make our own copies so we're not depleting your supply. And a lot of financial institutions will do that now, so that you're not giving them away. We'll actually keep you whole in how many you've got by the time you walk out of here.
The next question goes along with death certificates. They asked, does the funeral home pass that cost on to the family?
Absolutely. That's why we're saying you want to make sure how many you really need. Not to say anything negative about the funeral homes, but some have encouraged people to order 20 originals at $25 a piece. That's not necessary, in my opinion. But again, I don't know your family's financial situation. That cost will definitely be part of the funeral arrangement costs. So you want to be cautious about how many you need that are true originals.
Again, we have, another question on that. They ask, you can always order more later if you need, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not a quick process. For funeral homes, we're generally seeing a turnaround time of 3 weeks to actually get a death certificate once the funeral home request has been placed. Just so you know, it's not going to happen tomorrow if you request it today.
Another question we have is, what should I do if my loved one does not have a sufficient estate plan?
And I'm not sure if that means for being able to pay off all debts. A lot of times, depending on the institutions, like for us specifically, we do have some losses. We do realize that someone could pass away that did end up at the end using their credit card for things that they didn't have the finances to cover. There are times where we will have a credit card that there is no monies to pay it. Because if the credit card was just in the deceased person's name, it would go against the estate to claim that funds. But again, if there is no estate, if there is no house or money, assets or car, then we just put that as a write-off, as a loss against that person. You will not be required personally to pay a debt from a family member if you weren't joint on it, or if you're not the executor handling the estate. So if your mom loves shopping on the Home Shopping Network and she racked up a $20,000 credit card bill and she has no other assets because she lived with you, more than likely when she passes, that $20,000 credit card will get charged off by the institution because there's no assets. They can try and ask you to pay for that, but if you weren't on that credit card and you don't get any other assets from your mom that should have gone to pay that credit card, they can't ask you to be responsible for that debt.
And then the last question we have for today is, what would you say is the number one task that's most commonly overlooked but is very important?
Gosh, that's a tough question. Thanks for making that the last one.
I think the safe deposit box is a big one. They just don't think about it.
Yeah,
or a lot of times nobody knows about it.
That's true. Safe deposit box. And that would probably be something that's a what to do when your loved one passed away. For you personally, for me personally, for anyone, I encourage you to write down where you have things, what you have. The biggest mistake is for someone to pass away and people are calling us saying, hey, can you tell me if mom had an account here? Because they just don't know. So having the information available for your loved ones is huge. Preparing for these things so that you've got the list ready to go. I can't stress enough, and I think that's something we're looking at as a future presentation, just getting your ducks in a row. But these are your loved ones you're leaving. You want to make sure you're going to make things as easy as possible for them so they're not thinking ill of you afterwards as they're trying to get your assets resolved. But again, look for all those documents, because there's nothing too more frustrating when you do go into an institution to try and resolve things and you don't have the documents, the papers, the things that you need to resolve.
It could be in that safe deposit box.
That's true. Hopefully we've answered most of your questions, but seriously, the email address is there for us. Our phone number is there for you. We are here to assist you with these. So if you've got questions, we're more than happy to assist.
Yes, as Tamara mentioned, their phone number and email is up on the screen, so if you have any further questions, definitely feel free to reach out. But with that, thank you all so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.